You have probably never had to put a price on a bed you slept in for 30 years. I hope you never do. It's $140 in case you ever wonder, and the man who buys it will ask you to help him carry it down the steps to his truck, and you will help him because you're standing right there. I'm 70 years old. Last spring I sold that bed and the dresser and the car and my mother's good dishes, and I flew to a neighborhood called Sampaloc in Manila on a one-way ticket, and I do not have an address in the United States anymore. Not a house, not an apartment, not so much as a room with my name on a lease. My daughter Christy hugged me at the curb outside the airport in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and she said, "You'll be back in 3 months, Mom." She didn't say it to be cruel. She said it the way a person reads off a weather forecast. That sentence is still working on me 14 months later. My own daughter had sat down and run the same numbers I had run, and she came out the other end of them, betting against me. 9 days after I landed in Manila, I bought a ticket home. $1,180, paid, confirmed, a seat with a number on it, Manila to Tokyo to Detroit. That was $1 out of every 8 I had in this world. 2 mornings after that, I was standing at the check-in counter at the airport with both my bags up on the scale and my passport in my hand. I never got on the plane. I still do not know whether it was the one smart thing I've done or just a thing that happened to me while I stood there. Either way, I'm still here. 3rd floor, no elevator, a street where the bakery ovens start at 3 in the morning. My name is Sharon. 29 years I did payroll at an auto parts plant in Fort Wayne. Brake components mostly. I made sure a whole plant floor of people got the right money on a Thursday. But if I got it wrong, a man who welded for a living came looking for me, and he was right to. The other thing I did for 30 years was sing alto at a church up the street from our house, Wednesday practice and Sunday services. Alto is the part nobody can pick out. If we did it right, you didn't hear us at all. You only heard that it sounded full. You have probably never heard an alto in your life. My husband was Vern, maintenance electrician at the same plant. That's how I met him, standing on a chair fixing a light over my desk in 1979, telling me my chair was going to give out on me, which it did. He died 6 years ago in April. He was sick 11 months, and the last of it was bad. Hospice was covered, the nurse was covered. But what was not covered was a couple of weeks in a motel in Indianapolis while he saw the specialist. The ramp a fellow built onto our back steps. The parking garage at the hospital. Every copay. And the little things you buy late at night because your husband can't swallow anything else. You know the kind of thing I mean. By the time it was over, there were 2 credit cards with more on them than I like to say out loud. The balance when I sold that bed was $12,800 because the interest was 24%. I knew what that interest could do. 6 years on, I was still making payments for the privilege of my husband dying. Then last February, the letter came. My rent was going from $740 to $1,050. Same apartment, same brown carpet, same window unit that dripped on the sill. Effective the 1st of May, and if I didn't want it, there were people who did. My Social Security is $1,380 a month. So I turned that letter over and did it on the back in pencil, because that's how I do everything. $1,050 for rent, $290 on the cards, the minimum, mostly interest. Electric and water and the phone, near enough $150. And I hadn't bought an egg yet. Over $100 in the hole every month before I ate anything. And that's before the car insurance. You can check it again. Rent still wins. I called the county about senior housing. If you've made a call like that, you know the voice. Nice, patient. 4 years, she said. Maybe 5. They'd mail me something. And I sat there with the phone still in my hand. You cannot wait that long at my age. You just can't. I called Christy on a Sunday and read her the letter. She's in her 40s. She schedules patients at an orthodontist office in Indianapolis, and she has more sense than I do about most things. She said, "Mom, come here. You can have Paige's room. Paige is at Purdue. She's hardly home." Paige's room. My granddaughter's ribbons on the corkboard and her name spelled out in wooden letters over the bed. And I said, "Thank you, honey," and I meant it. Then I sat in my chair in the dark and thought about getting up quiet at my age so as not to wake a house that isn't mine. And about hearing my son-in-law tell somebody on the phone that Christy's mom is staying with them for a while. For a while. That's the phrase that got me. But everybody in that family knew it would not be for a while. My son is Barry. He hasn't called me since the March before his father died. You can pick from the theories I've got, but none of them holds up. I left him a voicemail before I flew. He never called back. You probably have somebody like this in your own family. Most people do. It was Nympha who put the Philippines in my head. Not a seminar, not a video. Nympha is a caregiver. She came to us through the hospice agency in Vern's last months, several nights a week, overnight, so I could sleep. She cut Vern's hair sitting up in that rented hospital bed in our front room, a towel around him and kitchen scissors, and it was better than the barber's. She called him Sir. Vern hated being called Sir and told her to quit it more times than I can count. But she never quit it, and by the end, I think he liked losing that argument. She brought a paper bag of soft rolls from a Filipino bakery. Vern couldn't eat them by then. I ate them standing over the sink and cried, which I had not done in front of anybody yet. She went home to the Philippines a few years ago. Her mother was getting on, and there was nobody else. She wrote her number on the back of a card and said, "Ma'am, you call me." And I put it in my address book, the little vinyl one, and called her at Christmas. We talked about nothing for a few minutes. Then the years went by. I called her in March, the week I was selling the car, not before. But I called her when I was already halfway out the door and scared to death. And she talked to me about her mother. Her mother is in her 70s, lives in Manila, and Nympha said, "Ma'am, my mother has nothing, not a peso of her own money, nothing." And I said the polite thing you say when you don't understand yet. And Nympha said, "No, but listen, ma'am, somebody is in that house all day, somebody. Her sister comes. The boys from next door come. The girl from the store comes with her rice. My mother is never alone an hour." And she stopped and she said, "I don't know how to say this right in English. You have the money problem, ma'am. My mother has the other problem. In America, they fix the money one, and the other one, nobody fixes it. Nobody even calls it a thing." I didn't think about that much at the time. I was hunting for a way out. Her mother's cousin had a building on their street with rooms upstairs. 5,500 pesos, she said. That was $95, near enough, against 1,050. That's what moved me. Not the woman who is never alone. The $95. I ran it on the back of that rent letter, and for the first time since Vern died, I could see money left at the end of a month. My hands were shaking. It was relief, plain as a paid bill. I checked the back of that letter again before I said Manila out loud to Christy. So I sold everything. It took most of the spring, and it was boring and humiliating in a low, small way that nobody tells you about. Saturdays in the yard with masking tape and a coffee can for change. You find out fast what your life is worth to a stranger. The bed for $140. Vern's fishing gear to a man who looked at me a while and offered $30. I said fine, because I wanted him off my grass. The car, an old sedan with a lot of miles on it, went for $4,200 to a kid who ran a press at the plant and didn't know I used to sign his check. 2 things I would not sell. Vern's wedding ring, which is on a chain in my bag to this day, and a black binder, my choir folder, 30 years of music in it with my own pencil marks all over, where to breathe and where to come in soft. I packed it anyway. Everything I owned turned into $8,600, and there was a little more in a savings account at the credit union that hadn't moved since Vern died. The flight, a passport renewal, a suitcase with a wheel that worked. I got on the plane with $9,400 and change, and a Social Security check that follows me to the Philippines. I checked that every way I knew how before I did any of this. You would too. Christy asked me on the phone the week before. She said, "Mom, do they even let you into the Philippines without a ticket back?" I told her I had one, and I did. She let that go, and I let her let it go. The honest version was longer than either of us wanted on a Tuesday night, and it would have started an argument I'd already had with myself. Christy drove me to the airport. You can't go past the security line with somebody, so we set it by the escalator, and she cried and I did not, which I've felt bad about ever since. Paige texted me a heart and a picture of a mango from the grocery store, which was sweet and had nothing to do with anything. And Christy said the 3 months line, and then, "I'm not saying it to be mean," and I said, "I know, baby." 2 planes and a night sitting up in a plastic chair in Tokyo, and the doors opened in Manila in the dark on the 8th of May. 9 days later, I bought a ticket back. Nympha had told me to text her the minute I landed. I did, standing at the baggage belt with my thumbs, but the little word underneath it said, "Delivered," and then nothing. So I did what you do at my age. I got in the line for the taxis with the address on a piece of paper in Nympha's handwriting. I handed it to the driver, and he read the name of the street back to me in a way I didn't recognize as the same street. The air came in the window warm and wet like a laundry room, and it smelled like diesel and like something frying. It was going to be in the 90s by lunch. My ankles were the size of my calves. That was my first hour in the Philippines. We got there before the sun was properly up. Sampaloc is the student part of Manila. The streets are narrow and stacked with rooms to rent, photocopy shops, little places that sell you rice and a piece of fish. My building has rooms above the ground floor, where Aling Tinay lives. She's a tiny widow. She was down at the gate in a house dress with her hair still in a clip, and she looked me over and said, "Ma'am, you are very early." and then she carried my small bag up the stairs herself before I could stop her, on a hip that I found out later had been bad for years. 43 steps. I counted them that morning and every morning since. No elevator. But the last few are steeper than the rest, for reasons nobody has ever explained to me. You feel those in your knees. A bed frame with a foam mattress on it, a plastic chair, a bare bulb, windows with jalousie glass you crank open, and a bathroom with a bucket and a plastic dipper in it. The water pump runs before dawn for a while, and you fill the blue drums on the landing, and that's your water. If you sleep through it, that's your problem. You learn fast. Christy has a dishwasher. I stood there filling a drum with a dipper and thought about that. The bakery is a door down and across, a concrete room with big ovens that makes the bread for the whole neighborhood. They light those ovens at 3 in the morning, and the wall of my room shares heat with them. On the corner there's a videoke machine in a doorway hung with red plastic strips, and it runs late, sometimes later. There's a man who sells Tahoe in the mornings with a transistor radio taped to his cart. From my bed I heard people I never laid eyes on going all the way up into the big notes of songs I've known my whole life. Somebody sang the same song badly, then started it over, and I lay there thinking that I had gotten off a plane and paid for this. You would have thought it too. Day 2, I went looking for Nympha's mother. I had the house number. A few doors up, same side, green gate, and a mango tree over the wall dropping fruit in the street that nobody picks up. A woman came out and I said Nympha's mother's name. She called somebody else, and a teenage girl translated for us, patiently, repeating it because I kept saying it wrong. Nympha had taken her mother to Cebu 6 weeks before. Her husband's mother was dying down there, and the whole thing had moved. And the girl said, kind as anything, in beautiful English, "I thought you knew, ma'am." She said you were her friend from America. Cebu is an island. It's a flight or a long boat ride away, but it is not, in any sense that matters, the street I was standing on. Nympha wrote me back the next day. "Ma'am, I am so sorry. I am in Cebu now. My husband's mother is very sick. Are you okay, ma'am?" And a heart. That was the last of it for a good while, because her mother-in-law took weeks and weeks to die, and Nympha was the one holding the spoon. And I understand that better than most people alive. But the only person in this country who knew my name had been 500 miles south of me for a month and a half. I hadn't asked. She hadn't thought to say. To her, it was not the same country I thought it was. I sat on the steps between the second and third floor for a while after that. There's a landing there where you can see a strip of sky between the buildings. The rent math on that letter was right. It still hadn't warned me about this. You can get the price right, but nobody writes down what you do after. Not for this. I guess they can't. Nights 3 and 4 I did not sleep. And I don't mean poorly. I mean not at all. I lay on that foam in my underwear with a wet washcloth on my chest and heard the whole city do its business. The ovens, the jeepneys starting up before dawn, that low diesel knocking. At night, the heat didn't go down, it only stopped moving. Somewhere in there, I typed out a message to Christy about the woman being in Cebu, and I read it over, and I heard 3 months in it, and I held down the key until it was gone. On day 3, I bought a fan. Little plastic thing on a stand, 480 pesos, at a hardware stall down the block, or the next block over, I forget. Blue, with a blade slightly warped so it ticks every fourth turn. Tick. Every fourth turn. It never got fixed. I never wanted it fixed. The second floor is 3 college kids in one room. Bernie does civil engineering. The first thing he ever did was take a water drum out of my hands on the landing and carry it up. He did it walking backwards, so he could keep arguing with somebody below him about a grade. Dora does hotel and restaurant management. Calvin is 21, criminology, enormous and gentle, and afraid of the dog 2 houses down. They split the rent between them, and they're up at all hours with photocopies spread across the floor. Inside of a week, that fan was in their room. It went down the stairs in Calvin's arms with an apology attached to it, and it came back up 2 days later with a different apology. That happened, I want to say, a dozen times in the first couple of months. I would go looking for my own fan in my own building. You try staying cross about that. And I met Aling Pressy at the market. Wet market, which means the floor is wet and there are fish, and there are women who've sat behind the same little table for years. Pressy sells eggplant, calabaza, tomatoes, and those long green beans in bundles. Third day I bought from her, she asked how old I am, straight out. I said 69, and she said it to the woman beside her, and that woman said it down the row. I stood there while my age went 20 feet in a language I don't speak, and everybody looked up and nodded at me like I'd done something. Then came day 5. I went to the big grocery on the avenue with a basket. Rice, eggs, coffee, a jar of peanut butter because I was homesick in my mouth. And my card came back declined. The girl ran it again, declined. I had my credit card and that came back declined too, and by then there were people behind me. You know how a line goes quiet behind you? It goes quiet. And I didn't argue about it, I put the basket on the floor by the register and walked out into the heat with nothing. In my wallet, I had 1,900 pesos. $33, near enough. You do that math fast. And for 2 days, I believed my money was gone. Not stolen, exactly. Sealed up in a wall on the other side of the planet. I had the bank's app right there on my phone, and it opened fine, and it showed me 9,300 and change. But seeing the number made it worse, not better. You would think it would help. It does not. I ate pan de sal from the bakery and eggs, which is cheap, and I walked instead of taking the jeepney. And I unplugged the fan at night to save on the electric, which was foolish, and saved me about 40 cents, and cost me 2 nights. And I did not tell a living soul. Not Tanae, who was right below me. Not Christy. I was 69 years old, and my card had been refused in front of a line of people, and I could not say it out loud. The hold was on the card, not on the account. My bank is a credit union in Fort Wayne. When their fraud system saw a card that had never left Indiana buying rice in Manila, it shut the card off, which is the thing you'd want it to do on any other day of your life. But the money was never frozen. I could have moved it through the transfer app my nephew set up for me before I left and picked up pesos in cash at a counter down the block. That would have worked the whole time. They had tried to warn me, too. They sent a fraud alert text to my old American cell number, the one I'd canceled the week before I flew, to save $52 a month. I called them at 2 in the morning my time, which is 2 in the afternoon theirs, sitting on that landing with the sky strip over my head. A young man named something I didn't catch asked me my mother's maiden name. and the amount of my last deposit, which I knew to the penny, because of course I did. He was very sorry, ma'am, he said. I see you're traveling. And I said, no, honey, I'm not traveling. By then, I was already sick. That started day 6. It came on as being tired in a way that didn't make sense. Then a fever. Then a low ache in my back on the left side that I told myself was the mattress and the stairs. You tell yourself things. By the middle of the night on day 6, I couldn't keep water down, and I was shaking hard enough that the bed frame knocked the wall. I sat down on the second-floor landing at first light because I could not do the last flight. That's where Dora found me on her way out to an early class, in her white uniform with her hair wet. There's a clinic a couple of streets over, upstairs above a store that sells school shoes. Calvin walked one side of me and Dora the other, and neither of them said much. The doctor was a woman with reading glasses pushed up in her hair, not gentle and not unkind, quick. She pressed on my back and I made a sound I had never made in my life. I hope you never make it. She sent me down the hall for a urine test and a blood count, sent the urine for a culture, and read the first paper standing up. She said, "This is your kidney, ma'am, not your stomach. You have had an infection in your bladder for a while, and you did not treat it, and now it is in the kidney." She said, "At your age, this is the kind of thing that puts you in the hospital." Then she asked me if I had insurance, and I said, "No, ma'am, not here." A nurse ran fluid into my arm and the first antibiotic with it. They kept me until I could hold down water. The doctor sent me home with pills for 10 days and said she'd call if the culture disagreed. The visit and tests and drip and pills came to $19.40. All told, $34, about the cash I'd had 2 days before and couldn't have gotten at. If the fever wasn't down in 2 days, I was to go straight to the hospital. A private room and a drip, she said. 40,000 pesos, maybe more. She looked at me over the glasses. Christy called on video that night. Day 7. I propped the phone against the back of the plastic chair so she'd get the ceiling and a piece of the wall and not the rest of it. And I told my daughter that the room was lovely. I said the light was pretty in the afternoon. I said there's a little balcony, which there is not. There is a landing with 2 water drums on it. I said I slept like a rock. You've done it on some phone call of your own. Somebody has raised you to. I was sitting on the floor while I said all this with a fever of 101 and a plastic bag by my knee in case. She said, "See, you sound good, Mom. You sound like yourself." Day 8. I looked at my suitcase and the big one was still zipped. I'd been living out of it like a woman in a motel, taking things out and putting them back, and I'd hung nothing on the nails in that wall. Day 9, the 16th of May. The fever broke in the afternoon. I ate half a bowl of rice and kept it. And at 11 o'clock that night, I sat on that landing with the fan going tick every 4th turn, and I opened my phone and I bought a ticket home. $1,180. Manila to Tokyo to Detroit, out at 7:20 in the morning on the 18th. I didn't look at it long before I did it. I remember the little wheel going around while it processed, and thinking about my daughter saying 3 months, and thinking, well, 9 days, and there was no fight left in that thought at all. It was flat. It was arithmetic. $1 out of every 8 I had spent to undo the whole thing. Then I lay down and slept 7 hours straight through the ovens and everything, for the first time since Indiana. That night I made a plan about the fan, and it is not a thing I like about myself. I decided I'd leave it for Dora. That was the extent of my sentiment. I had a seat on a plane home and a plan for a 480 peso fan. The next evening, about 6:45, somebody down the street started screaming a word I did not know. The word was sunog. It means fire. It started on the second floor of a house 2 doors down from mine, where a family took in laundry and ran too much off a single outlet. 6:45 in the evening, still light. By the time I got to my window, there was orange coming out of a window across from the bakery. The sound of it is a dry ripping, and under it people yelling instructions. Our street is too narrow for a fire truck, so the street starts moving before anybody official gets there. The blue drums came off the landings. Everybody's drums. Buckets, laundry basins, a big rice pot. The bakery ran a hose out of its wall. Men stood on the next roof with it while boys filled anything that would hold water and passed it up. Calvin was in that line for hours, and I could hear Bernie's voice going hoarse. I was in the street in my nightgown with a house dress pulled over it, useless as a post. A girl of maybe 19 came running past me and stopped and turned and put a baby in my arms. She said something and pointed up the street, and she was gone. She did not ask. She did not know my name. She had, I found out later, 2 other children up in that house, and she went back for them. I stood at the corner by the bakery holding that baby for 4 hours. 4 hours. It was a boy, a few months old, with a heat rash on his neck and no shoes, and he slept and woke up screaming and slept again. I fanned him with a scrap of cardboard off a bread flat. My arms went numb, and then past numb into something I don't have a word for, and I kept walking him 3 steps one way and 3 steps back, a thing my hands remembered from 1982. Every so often somebody came by and looked in at him and went on. Nobody offered to take him. The baby was in my arms, and that was the end of the question for everybody on that street but me. Christy has never once handed Paige to a stranger. Neither had I. His mother came back for him a little after 11 with her face all black around the eyes. She took him, and she held on to my forearm with her other hand for a second, hard, and said, "Thank you, Po," and went to find her sister. 2 houses burned to the ground, and a 3rd was gutted. Nobody died. A man broke his foot coming off a wall, and an old woman lost the sewing machines that were how she ate. They ran a collection down the street the next day, and I put in 200 pesos, which was not nearly what I could have afforded, and it still sits with me. It did not change my mind. I came out of it with sore arms. That was all I came out of it with. I went upstairs at 2:30 in the morning with smoke in my hair. I set my alarm for 4, and I lay there with my arms shaking on top of the sheet, thinking about the 18th of May, 7:20 in the morning, Manila to Tokyo to Detroit. At 4, Aling Tine was already awake, out on the step with a broom, sweeping ash off her own tiles in the dark. She looked at the 2 suitcases. She said, "Ma'am?" Just that. I said, "I have to go home," and she said, "Okay, sige." And then she went inside and came back out with a cold bottle of water from her own refrigerator and put it in my hand. She did not say a word to talk me out of it, which I did not appreciate properly for months. The taxi was 500 pesos at that hour with no traffic. Terminal 3 was full at 5:30 in the morning, whole families in the fluorescent light with trolleys and about 900 boxes wrapped in packing tape. I got in the line for check-in, 23 kilos on the big one and 19 on the other. The woman at the counter was maybe 30, hair pulled back tight, tired, nice enough. She took my passport and put a sticker on the handle of the big case. And then she said, "Ma'am, if this bag misses your connection in Tokyo, where do we deliver it? I need a street address in the States." And I opened my mouth to answer her. It was not a big cinematic thing. What happened was that I started to say Indianapolis, and I got to the street, and I could not produce the house number. And then I understood, standing there with my hand on the counter, that the number I was reaching for was on a house where my granddaughter's name is spelled out in wooden letters over a bed I would be sleeping in. I had no address, not no house, no address. My mail goes to my nephew's place in Ohio because somebody has to receive a jury summons, and I stood there working out what that would mean. A suitcase driven 4 hours to a garage in Ohio, to a man I see twice a year, while I sat in Indianapolis in a room with somebody else's name over the bed. My apartment in Fort Wayne had a new woman in it by then, paying $1,050 for that brown carpet. There was no room anywhere on this earth that was mine that I could put on that form and have it be true. And I had just paid $1,180 to fly to it. She was patient with me. She said it again, softer. "An address for the bag, ma'am. Any address." I said, "Could you give me a minute?" And I took my passport back off her counter, and I pulled both bags out of that line. I sat down in a plastic chair by a column, and I sat there about 40 minutes. It wasn't the baby I sat there thinking about, and it wasn't the sunset over anything. It was this. If I get on that plane, I arrive in Detroit with $8,000, no bed, no lease, and a daughter who was right. That's the whole of it. And she would be kind to me for the rest of my life about being right. But 11 years from now, if I got 11, that is where I would still be. The other side of it was a foam mattress on the 3rd floor of a building on a street that had been on fire the night before. In a country where the only person who knew my name had moved 500 miles away without mentioning it. That was not hope. It was the smaller of 2 bad columns, and I sat in that plastic chair and picked it. I did not board. I went and found the service desk on the other side of the hall and asked the man there to cancel it. He did it in about 4 minutes. He said the refund goes back to the card in 6 to 8 weeks, minus the fee, ma'am. He printed me a paper. Then I went back out through those glass doors into the heat, into the taxi line. 520 pesos to be driven back to Sampaloc. 3 days of my rent for a round trip to a counter. The money came back on the 3rd of July, $923.60. The paper names an $80 cancellation fee. The rest of it, $176.40. Nobody has ever explained. I called twice. The first person said it was tax on the Tokyo segment that isn't refundable. The second person said it was a fair rule and read me a code. I did payroll for 29 years and I could not make that number come out. But I have decided I'm allowed to just be angry about it instead of understanding it. You are allowed that too, whatever yours is. I kept the paper. It's folded in the front cover of my choir binder, and on the back of it I wrote in pencil, May 18th, did not board. I don't know why I wrote it. I've never sung a note out of that binder since Indiana. Tanae was on her step in the morning when the taxi let me out. She looked at the suitcases coming back out of the trunk. She did not say a thing about it, not that day, not ever. But she took the small case and carried it up the first flight on that hip of hers before I could get my hand on it. I unpacked on the 20th, day 13. 2 nails in the wall, a dress on each. The $95 is what got me onto the plane in the first place, but it is not what got that suitcase open. What I did with the rest of that month was walk. Down to the market late in the afternoon when the heat comes off, because then the street is full of people and you're less obvious in it. Christie's 3-month mark was still about 10 weeks away. I counted it off on my fingers on the way down the hill. You know how you do that when a date scares you. I wasn't walking down there for the rent anymore. I didn't have the other word for it yet. And on one of those walks at the end of May, I saw the balloons. 3 houses down from the burned lot, somebody had strung a tarpaulin across the front of a house and put about 40 plastic chairs under it, and there were balloons tied to the gate, white ones and blue ones. In my second week, there'd been a birthday for a little girl on that same stretch of street. Same tarp, same chairs, a man shouting numbers into a microphone for bingo. So when I asked Aling Tinai what was going on up there, and she said pasiyam, and I caught the syam in it, which is 9, and 9 was a number I already had a relationship with by then, I put it together wrong in about 2 seconds. Somebody's child is turning 9. So I bought a mocha cake at the bakery with the piped icing on it, 380 pesos, and 4 foil balloons on sticks from a stall by the market. And I put on my good blue dress, and at 7 in the evening, I walked into a family's 9th night of prayers for their dead father, carrying a cake and balloons. A pasiyam is the 9th night. A person dies and there are 9 nights of the rosary in the house, and the 9th is the big one, and everybody on the street comes. They laughed. I mean out loud, the whole room, and a boy on the steps put his head down on his knees and howled and got hit on the back of the head by his mother for it. Calvin was there, and Calvin had to walk off and stand facing a wall. There was a photograph of a man of about 75 printed on the tarp over my head, and I had brought a cake for a 9-year-old who did not exist. And then the widow came out of the house. She's in her 70s, black dress, glasses on a chain. She took that cake box out of my hands with both of hers and said something to the room that shut it up. And then she went in and dragged out the good chair, the one with the arms and the cushion that was sitting empty at the front, which I understood later had been her husband's. She put me in it, and I sat in a dead man's chair through 50 minutes of a rosary in a language I do not speak, and every so often the woman next to me put her finger on her book to show me where we were, which did not help, and I let her do it. At 10, they cut my cake, and the widow brought me the first slice back on a plate. On the 3rd of June, I had to go make myself legal because the stamp they gave me at the airport ran out on the 6th. Bureau of Immigration, and you take a number and you sit under a fan that turns its head away from you. 3,000 and change to stay another month. At the next one, they made me register for the alien card too, another 3,000 pesos, and $50 American on top, fingerprints and all. I sat on that bench working out how I'd put this to Christy. Your mother buys her country by the month now. There is no way to put that to your own child that doesn't come out sounding like the start of an apology. The woman ahead of me in that line was American too. 66, I think she said, from Toledo, Ohio, and she was going home for good. 9 years down south. She was there to sort out her exit paper, and she had a little notebook with a list of everything she was giving away and who was getting what. Her sister has Parkinson's, and there is nobody else. She was not bitter, is the thing. She said the country had been good to her and she'd stay if it was only her to think about. And then she said she'd never really learned the language in all that time and didn't seem embarrassed about it. She was taking a rice cooker home in her hand luggage. She told me to get my blood checked twice a year after a kidney thing and wrote the name of a cheap laboratory in Sampaloc on the back of my number stub. You can meet somebody going the other way from you and still not know what to do with her. I still don't. Her road was open to me, but I didn't take it. People are people wherever you go, you know. My mother used to say that. By then, the students downstairs had taken me over. Dora bringing up a plate of rice and fish I hadn't asked for, and standing in my doorway while I ate it, because in her family, you don't leave a person eating alone. Bernie rewiring my outlet so the fan and the light quit fighting, taking no money for it, really just a few days of coffee. Calvin moving me off the tourist load at the store onto a cheap student plan I hadn't known existed. In July, Tina's electric bill went up 1,400 pesos, and power was included in what we paid her, so it was her money. That fight happened on the stairs where everybody could hear it. If you've ever shared a power bill, you know the sound. Tina blamed the rice cooker and that electric kettle. The boys blamed the American with a fan running all night upstairs. It went around in both languages until Bernie brought the old bill and the new one to Tina's table. Then he came up and said, "Ma'am Shar, you count things. Come help." We spread both bills out. Bernie found the rate change printed on the other page. He read the plates on the appliances while I checked the multiplication. My fan cost the house maybe 150 pesos a month. The rice cooker cost more. Tina pulled at the freezer door and the seal came loose in her hand. That motor had been running most of the day. I had missed it. Tina hadn't. Bernie said the students could put in 200 more. I offered 250 because I slept with the fan on. Tina said she'd get the seal fixed. We all said yes. Calvin wrote the amounts on the wall by the meter in pencil, and they're still there. I turned 70 that August in that room on my own. Christy called, and I let her think I had somewhere to be. When the boys found it out in October off my papers, they were put out with me for a week. Nobody in that building has ever called me Lola. Not the boys, not Tanae, not Dora. I'm the American upstairs who always has tape. But they came up those stairs and asked me to help, and then we settled it together, and I would not trade that for a word. Nympha told me on the phone in March that America fixes the money problem and leaves the other one lying where it fell. I didn't know what she was talking about until the students stood in my doorway with a light bill. The paper went up on our gate at the end of September, and I thought it was about the water. It sat there the better part of a month, taped to the ironwork, going soft in the rain. On the 12th of October, Calvin stopped in front of it and read it out to me. The land under that house belongs to a family across town. Aling Tene had rented the house off them for 22 years, and it was hers in every way except the way that counts. They were putting up a dormitory. Everybody out by the 22nd. 10 days. You can pack a lot of fear into that. You try it at my age. There was a man going around after the fire in a good polo shirt, leaving cards under doors, saying he found places. He had a room for me nearby with its own bathroom. He wanted 15,000 pesos for the processing, in cash, and he wrote me a receipt with a name on it and a number. I paid him. A few days later, the number rang and then quit ringing at all. Calvin walked me over to that address, and there's no such unit. And the woman who does live there said other people had come by that month asking for the same man. $260. But what I felt was not anger. It was that I was exactly the woman my daughter had been afraid I'd turn into. I spent most of the deadline walking through building after building. Some wouldn't rent to a foreigner without a Filipino to sign alongside me. One wanted 2 months deposit plus a month advance, which I could have covered, but which would have hurt. Near the end of the deadline, Tanae took me to Leong Lan, to a house that belongs to her late husband's cousin. She was taking the rooms on the ground floor. There was a room upstairs at 8,000 pesos. Deposit and advance came to 16,000. She had already paid it, before she took me over there. She paid the deposit on a room for a 70-year-old American she'd known since spring. That night, I wrote out a monthly repayment schedule, dated, with a line for each of us to sign, because that's the only way I know how to be easy about money. You might have done it too. But she pushed the paper back across the table and wouldn't touch it. She said, "Bayad ka na lang kung kaya na. Magkapitbahay tayo. Pay when you can. We are neighbors." In December, Dora told me where that money came from. Tanae had been putting it aside for her hip for years. A widow with a bad hip who has never in her life had a month she didn't have to think about. She put 16,000 pesos on me and wouldn't take a piece of paper for it. I still haven't told Christy that part. I've had months to. My Social Security is $1,380. That's what actually lands after they take the Medicare piece out of it. A little over $200 a month for insurance that's almost no use to me in Manila. But I keep paying it. If I drop it and I ever do go back, they penalize me for the rest of my life. So every month I buy almost nothing and I pay for it. You can call that stupid. I'd listen. 600 of what's left goes on Vern's card, every single month. It was 12,800 when I sold my bed, and it's just over 7,000 now. And that is the real thing the cheap rent bought me. Not a beach, not a view. 14 months off my husband's dying. The room on Leong Lan is 8,000 pesos. Everything else, food and water and power and my phone and the jeepney and the pharmacy and the month I buy back at immigration, runs somewhere between $500 and $600 a month in a month where nothing breaks. Things break, you know. If you've ever tried to budget around old teeth, you know what I mean. What I have behind me is $8,300. I came in with $9,400. It went down, not up, in my first year here in the Philippines, and I know exactly where. Some of it was that ticket. $260 was the man in the polo shirt, and the rest went into furnishing rooms from nothing, and those teeth, 18,000 pesos, which was cheap, and which I still had to pay. You may hear that reserve and think I'm safe. Some mornings, I think so too. I'm not sitting on anything. I've got no insurance here in the Philippines, and Medicare doesn't cover the care I'd need here. A week in a private hospital of the sort that doctor described to me on day 7 would take a third of everything I own. In a good month, there's $60, $70 left over and it goes back. But most months, there isn't a good month. Christmas over there starts in September, and by December, the whole street is lit up. On the 25th in the morning, which was still the 24th in Indiana, my daughter called me. In November, I'd finally sent her a photograph of my actual room because I got tired of being careful. So she opened with, "Mom, you told me there was a balcony." You know that pause after Mom, I heard it. I said, "I know," and she laughed, sort of. You know the sound that isn't quite a laugh. Then she was quiet a moment and said, "How much is a ticket?" I said, "What?" She said she'd been looking. April maybe, when Paige's semester ends. 10 days, if I could stand the two of them, and where would they stay? I knew the number to the dollar. 1,180. I told her about 1,000, 1,200, depending, and that Tanae rents a room downstairs by the week and would probably just give it to them. And my daughter said, Okay, let me look at April. She hasn't bought it. It isn't April yet. She did say another thing before we hung up. She said, "Barry knows where you are. He'd asked about me. And I didn't push it. Not on Christmas." 14 months now. The new place is on the 2nd floor instead of the 3rd, which I didn't ask for and which has changed more for me than anything else. 21 steps. You feel it in your knees. You really do. On the burned lot, they've got several floors up already, and the concrete dust comes down the street when the wind is right. The bakery still lights the ovens at 3, and I sleep through it. But I never noticed the night that changed. The fan is downstairs right now. It's been downstairs since Tuesday. 480 pesos, that fan. It still ticks every 4th turn, and Bernie keeps offering to fix it, but I keep telling him no. You'd fix it, I know. The boy from the fire walks now. His mother works at a laundry up the street, and she sees me at the market now and then. Every time she stops and turns him toward me and says something to him with my name in it. And every time he grabs her leg and hides his face, because to him I'm a large, white stranger and always will be. I've never learned his name, never asked, and I couldn't tell you why, and it's been over a year, so I suppose I won't. I've been to more paseums since that one. I know what to do now, more or less. You bring an envelope with what you can spare. You hand it to whoever's at the table by the door, and you sign the book. And then you sit down and don't talk much. The widow from that paseam moved north in the spring to be with her daughter. She came by to say goodbye and left me, for reasons of her own, a pair of her husband's reading glasses, which I didn't want and which I use every day. Nympha wrote in March. Her mother-in-law died in August, and her own mother is still with her in Cebu. She's working in a bakery outlet there. She said she thinks about me and asked if I was all right. She's never said sorry for not being here, but I've never asked her to. She didn't owe me a country. Last month at the market, Aling Pressy asked me, in front of the other women with their hands in the beans, "Ma'am, when do you go home?" And I said, "This is where my things are." And she said it back to the other women in Tagalog, and they all had a good time. Then she said, "Ay, ma'am, Hindi ka na bisita. You are not a visitor anymore. And she put an extra bundle of those long beans in my bag, which I didn't ask for and didn't pay for. I have had beans I didn't want all the time ever since. Not everything got fixed. My son hasn't called. I stopped mailing letters in October. I still know his birthday to the day, and I haven't made peace with it. I can't read a paper taped to my own gate without asking Kelvin what it says, and since October that scares me in a way it didn't before. I still haven't had the blood work that woman from Toledo told me to keep up with. And there's a church around the corner. I've gone, but I sat in the back and didn't sing. That black binder with 30 years of music in it is still on a plastic chair, the refund receipt folded into the front cover, my own pencil on the back of it. I still open that cover to check it's in there. I came here because $95 is less than $1,050. That was the reason, the whole reason. What it also bought, which was not on any list I made in pencil, was a widow downstairs putting her hip money on a room I had not asked her for. Let me ask you something before I go, because I do read what you write me, all of it, even the ones that tell me I've lost my sense. Is there an address anywhere on this earth that's yours? Not a room in somebody's house that they're being good about. Yours. And if there isn't one, what have you decided to do about it, at your age, with your money, honestly? I'd like to know. I'd rather hear yours than tell mine again.